This is the Real Estate Investing 365 podcast, your go-to source for real estate investing strategies so you can start living the life you want and get where you want to go. With your host, Justin Hanna.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Another episode of Real Estate Investing 365. Today I got with me Jeremy Jones. He lives in the Seattle area. He's originally from Colorado, Arvada, I believe, like a suburb of Denver. He went to school for music and computer science, and then kind of figured out maybe that's not his true love was the computer science or anything. So got into real estate investing and is definitely living a life by design. So Jeremy, thanks for being here, man. What's up?
Hello, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So you kind of are living the life that most real estate investors, maybe not specifically what you're doing, but your just whole vibe and everything. You just kind of got away from the corporate tech world, and then you get to do what you love every day, and mainly because of real estate investing, right?
Financially speaking, yes, because I invest with my younger brother who lives in Colorado, mm-hmm. and we have mostly multifamily properties in the Seattle area. And yeah, just the kind of the power of the passive income that comes from rental properties has enabled me to have a much more enjoyable, balanced lifestyle than I think I could have otherwise.
For sure. Yeah. Well, we'll dive into all that. So first, why don't you go ahead and give us like a little background on where you come from and then how you even got interested in real estate investing to begin with?
Sure. Okay. So like you said, I grew up in Arvada, Colorado, and then I went to college in Durham, North Carolina, Duke University, double majored in music and computer science. And then kind of at that point, my main passion was playing drum set and wanting to do music. And but I guess I had in the back of my mind this idea of wanting to be at least well-rounded enough to have some other kind of job or skill that I could do that would balance out music, in the sense that I could get a job or be able to earn money at times, maybe when my gigging or performance income wasn't yet established or was not as much as I wanted, to be able to pay off my student loans that I was picking up from Duke and have a house and, that kind of stuff. So I got a job at Microsoft after graduating from Duke, and then that's what brought me to Seattle area. And I had been born in Seattle, but didn't really spend much time here because my parents moved up here and I was born. Well, they lived in Seattle area, and then they moved back to Colorado. So I just kind of had in the back of my mind that I was like from Seattle. And then when I came up to Seattle, I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. And Microsoft jobs seemed really cool. There was a good music scene. So that's what got me to the Seattle area. And I've been here ever since. That was 2002 that I moved up here. And then in order to have a place to practice drums, which wouldn't work in like an apartment or condo, I bought a house without really knowing too much of what I was doing, but I just got a house as close to Microsoft as I could. And I got a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. And then I put an ad on the internal classifieds at Microsoft called Micronews to rent out the other 2 rooms. And just renting those 2 rooms was able to just about cover the mortgage. And kind of as the market appreciated, 2 years later, I was able to sell that house and then roll the proceeds into a 4-bed, 3-bath, live in the master, rent out the other 3 rooms, and have my drum room in the garage. And so that kind of just gave me the feel for real estate, like how, month after month, people that were renting the rooms are paying their rent, it's paying down the mortgage, the market is appreciating without any real skill on my own, and how I could see kind of the amount of effort and work it took at Microsoft compared to the effort it took to just own this property. And I was thinking I could probably duplicate this like 10 times if I had multiple rentals, if I could figure out how to get them, and I wouldn't have to work. Not that I want to be just lazy and sitting around all the time, but I want to work and I want to do things with my skills in the world and grow. But I think just my inclination was not to do it like in a structured corporate job.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's so funny you say that, like how you mentioned, how much you had to work at Microsoft in order to get what you achieved through the rental properties. And I literally tell that exact same thing to people all the time that don't, they come to me and they say, yeah, but I don't want to the classic thing, answer the phone at 2:00 in the morning to unclog a toilet, or those stupid things that people say that's never owned a lot of any real estate hardly.
Right.
And I always tell them, like, listen, if you buy one house, even if you buy one house and over 30 years you sell it for 300 grand and it paid itself off, how many hours of work did you have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drive your ass into the construction site or office or whatever to make 300 grand? Like a lot. But as opposed to how many hours you actually had to work on that property, maybe a couple hours a month at the most. You know? It's like, it's crazy. So that's a very good point for sure.
Yeah. And my house in Redmond that I still have, which I'm hoping this year to potentially sell it and roll it into a multifamily property. But as I've been working on co-investing with my brother, I've kind of just had this Redmond house as kind of this side property that I own and just in my own name, and I had it as rent by the room, and then I converted it last year back to a single family. So it's not a big cash flow compared to like our 8-unit apartments, and multifamily has much more potential for the rent kind of outpacing the expenses, especially as you upgrade the units and get the rents up. Whereas the single family, I feel like, at least for me, it's more linear. Like the rent increases are very slow, and for a larger home, like the repairs can easily eat up the cash flow. But even that said, I bought that property for $420,000 in 2005. And the down payment was basically entirely from appreciation on that previous home that had gone up like 60 grand in the 2 years that I owned it without doing any work to it. It was just the market moving. And then now it's worth close to $1 million. And, it's been some time, like it's 2002 to 2020. So, it's been 18 years, but it's like, how many people, can just save $600,000 in that period of time? And I've been cash flowing throughout that whole time. It's like, it's hard to do because you have to keep stocking away money. But in real estate, it's like each property that you get kind of becomes this like incubator of like just building up net worth regardless of your skill. And like you said, it's not like you're just grinding away, getting tenant calls every day. It's more like you're kind of going about your life, and every once in a while something pops in. And then you get on this cycle where it's like, okay, now I pay the property taxes. Now I file my taxes. Now I collect the rent. Now, they're late on the utility bill. I got a notice. I got to let the tenant know, or the property manager needs to let the tenant know. But there's a rhythm to it. It's way less energy and time intensive than, like you said, when you're working and you have other people that are controlling your deliverables and adding more deliverables. There's a certain like pressure and density to the work and time that just doesn't stop. Whereas real estate, there's definitely like gaps, where it's like, oh, nothing's really happening, just like a few weeks went by and everything's cool.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And one more point I have about that is, I've mentioned this on a couple of recent podcasts, people talking about, they're relying on their 401ks or their pensions and all this stuff in their big companies. Well, like the utility that I work for currently, I'm about to leave, they just filed bankruptcy and their stock went from $60 a share a couple of years ago down to $3 a share just recently.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like, I tell people, in one purchase that I had made of a couple properties that I have was 3 4-plexes. So 12 units is in one complex. So kind of like a small apartment complex, obviously it's still residential. But I said, listen, in that one purchase, the gross rents are $9,500 a month, and after I pay all my expenses right now off of just those, I cash flow like $3,100 a month.
Wow.
But if I just keep those for 30 years, the same amount of time that you're probably going to work at your company, that's going to be, probably at that time, you're probably going to be cash flowing $10,000 a month once you're paid off. And it's like, you're going to get, that's way more than you get from just that one purchase that you'll probably get from your pension at a big company. Most people, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's just
and it's a perpetual income stream, because if you leave your job and you've got this 12 unit cash flowing $10,000 a month, you're not thinking, oh, I hope that I die before it goes to zero. It's just, it's perpetual, and so going. Yeah, when you have a big chunk of money and you're trying to decide when to retire, the basic calculation is like, I'm going to pull on this thing and try to not like outlive the money. Whereas with real estate, you've got a stream and you don't have to think about so much hoping that I build up a big enough ball that I can die before I spend it, as just like, I'm going to create a stream and then I'm going to live off the stream, and the stream is perpetual. And then the cash flow from rent is that stream. And then you have like the net worth side of it, where you can sell a building and roll up to a larger building, or you can do a cash out refinance and pull out chunks of money. Yes, it's debt, but it's spendable money, where there's like these different, there's these different pockets of ways that the money flows, besides just if it's in, say, a stock or a bond or something like that, where it's basically just like it has a certain value, it's going up or it's going down. And then when you take it out, like you've depleted that principal. Whereas what I'm finding with the multifamily investing we're doing, where the cash flow is kind of that spendable stream that we want to be able to live off of. But then every once in a while, we will do a maneuver like sell a property and roll up to a bigger property. And maybe there'll be some financing involved where we take a cash out refi and just have like, say, 50 grand each that my brother and I can split to use for various things. And it's backed up by our real estate. And, or if you sell a property and are willing to take the capital gains hit to tap into some of the net worth that you've accumulated, you can accumulate it a lot faster than just by saving.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's so many avenues to it and so many benefits that you don't really get to recognize a whole bunch by just having, your first one, but you still, over time, just like everything, you get to learn more and more. So back to your original, when you first moved out to Seattle and you got hired at Microsoft and you decided to buy a house close to campus because you wanted to play drums. How did you even get the idea of doing, it's kind of house hacking, right? This is in 2003 or 2 or something like that?
2002, yeah.
2002. So how did you even get the idea of that? Did you know people in real estate, or did you read Rich Dad Poor Dad like everybody else? Or what was the
behind
that?
I can remember going to lunch with my uncle and a friend of my parents. My uncle had some rental property and he still does property management. And then this other family friend of ours who had a self-storage unit. And I remember that like they encouraged me to buy a place and rent out the rooms. Mm-hmm. And that it may have, the seed may have been planted somewhat from that, and somewhat from just things I had picked up along the way, like maybe even just like playing some Monopoly or something. I don't actually remember specifically hearing anybody say that like this was like a model like house hacking or the rent by the room or whatever. But, having just come out of living in the dorms for 4 years at Duke, like it was pretty natural to be like, hey, there's a lot of space here. Like I don't need all this space, because when I got this house, all of a sudden I went from a dorm. Now I had like a garage for my drums, a kitchen, a living room, a family room, an extra bathroom. And I was just like, yeah, I'll just rent these out. It's just kind of a natural progression. And I think also once I started working at Microsoft, part of my orientation was they shared about this micronews thing, like this internal classified. I was like, yeah, if you got like something to sell or you need something or you're renting a room. And I was like, oh, renting a room,
Yeah, for
that
sure.
kind of thing. And I just gave it a shot. Actually, I remember kind of feeling a little nervous about it, like with everything. And, when you start in real estate, it feels a little weird at first. Like I just graduated college and now I'm like a landlord. And I remember just like putting the ad up. I put the ad up on the micronews thing before I had even closed on the property. And the seller let me like walk through with this guy that responded to the ad. And then he was just like, yeah, this looks good. I'll take it. And the house was not impressive at all. It was just the price and the location being close to campus. But, those little moments kind of start to build your confidence in that you can do real estate when you see there's a demand for housing. And it continues to this day. Like when we have one of our properties, this 9-unit in Seattle, and we were renovating one of the units and put it up for rent towards the end of February. And then we also have a move out at the end of February and a move out at the end of March. And we posted the 1 unit for sale. And we got so many applications that our leasing agent was able to fill all 3 slots of the upcoming ones because they're all the same configuration. And I was just thinking, that's really what drives it, is like people are really hungry to find a place to live. And so I think that back then, just like seeing how easy it was to post a room for rent and have people call and say like, yeah, I want to check it out. And then also it was a kind of a roommate thing too. It was like, if I seemed like a cool guy and a fun person to live with, then they would be potentially more likely to want to rent from me. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it, like the friendship part. Then later on, I think like about 2007 or so, I kind of switched to like wanting my home to be my own space. And then I ended up just moving out of that house in Redmond and renting my own place and having that as a rental. So I was like, yeah, I own a home, but I don't live there. I rent my own place, but I'm, using it as a rental. And then that was where I had separated myself from, like, it's not roommates, it's a standalone rental property. That kind of gave me the idea, okay, now this is something I can duplicate. If I can figure out the financing and the acquisition of the next one, this is a model that can be duplicated.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I like that you said that you end up renting your own house and still owning that house while renting to other people. Mm-hmm. And, I think it's been like ingrained in people so much that you should go out and try to buy your own house,
mm-hmm.
it's a good investment and all that stuff. But,
mm-hmm.
Kind of like I think Robert Kiyosaki says it, and especially Grant Cardone, whether you love him or hate him, whatever the people's thoughts are on it. But he says kind of the same thing, like your own house is not your investment, which, it's only an investment if it ends up appreciating and you sell it at the right time.
Right.
But, I should put it on my website. I did like a whole 3-page workup of all these numbers comparing owning a house, buying your own house, and then trying to save up to buy a rental, or just renting for like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then all your money you save, you just buy a couple rentals.
Yes.
And then the numbers after the 10 years are like outrageously different, even if they're,
wow.
So if you're not in it for, everybody likes to own their own house because you like to work on it and all that stuff. But like us, we're going to rent for the next couple of years because I just want to take all this equity that the market's good right now and then put it into more rental properties. So that's not necessarily a bad move if anybody out there's thinking about it. It's good to keep that rental income coming and just rent a place yourself. So definitely a good point there.
Well, in my case, for 7 years from 2008, I moved out of my Redmond house. So I was renting it and not living there. And I was renting where I was living.
Yeah.
From 2008 to 2015. So 7 years I didn't own my own home. And then part of that time from 2012 to 15 is when I started going to the foreclosure auction and buying rental properties. And it got to the point, I don't remember exactly, but we were definitely over 25 units when I started thinking, okay, maybe now I'll buy my own place. And then even when I did buy this place that I live in now, it has a guest house, and I did Airbnb for 4 years. And I just started taking a break from that like in October. But I was doing the Airbnb, and that made me feel a lot more comfortable kind of splurging on a really awesome house to know that I could use it to generate income. Yeah. And like you said, like with your comparison, it's like it's not really an investment especially if you look at cash flow investing, your personal residence doesn't generate any money unless you're renting out some part of it. And so, Airbnb or rent out the room are possibilities. And then of course, if you have like a family and children and you want your own space, those things may not be possibilities, but it's fun to think that way and just think like, okay, what am I buying? What am I putting my money into that's like a lifestyle expense versus what is an asset that actually delivers cash flow? And then thinking of like, that's what an investment is. Like you said, that's what like the rich dad, poor dad thing was like, if it generates income monthly, that's an investment. If it costs money monthly, it's an expense.
Yeah, for sure. Well, no, that's awesome. So where did you kind of move from there? You said you ended up renting, and then did you guys just right away, you met up with your brother and he said, hey, I want to do this investing thing also? Or how did that transition take place from you house hacking these 2 properties and then getting into, you guys are in multifamily and have a bunch of units at this point?
Yeah. So I left my job at Microsoft, and then that was in 2006. And then from 2006 to 2012, I just had the one house in Redmond, and the market was basically, that was kind of that crash period, was that whole period. So the only thing that really affected me was that my equity line got frozen. And so I noticed that, but otherwise it didn't really have any effect. Like the rents at my house in Redmond near Microsoft didn't change, and I just kept renting out the rooms. And then my job at the time was drum set player and yoga teacher. I went to a yoga teacher training right after I left Microsoft, and it was a really, really nice lifestyle. And I saw that I was a little bit tight financially in the sense that I was doing what I loved on a day-to-day basis. But when it came to things like travel or vehicle or upgrading my drum set, and I'd look at, okay, if I want to buy like $1,000 piece of drum equipment, if I'm playing gigs that are paying me $150 or something, I got to do like 6-7 gigs or something to pay for this one thing. And then there was this like pivotal moment. So I was renting a cottage in East Renton, so kind of southeast Seattle area, really beautiful spot. And so I'm the renter, and then there's a riding lawnmower because there was like some acreage, and the riding lawnmower broke down. And I told the landlord, expecting it to be like an appliance that she would have repaired. And she said, no, actually, your job is to maintain the landscaping. It's my favor to you to be giving you this lawnmower. You have to get it fixed. And getting this riding lawnmower, like renting a trailer, putting the thing on the trailer and taking it somewhere and paying for it out of pocket, like really got me thinking like, okay, the reason, like I could be mad at her or mad at the situation, but like the basic reason this is happening is because I am the renter and she controls the scenario to some degree here, you know? And then I thought I much prefer the situation at my rental property where the money is flowing toward me. The decision-making power is more in my hands. And so I just started thinking, okay, now how can I get back a little bit more control of my financial life? Because also like the tension that I felt over that, whatever it was, $2,000 to fix this huge riding lawnmower, I realized was just partly due to me not having a lot of savings and not making like a lot of extra income each month from my gigs and yoga teaching. And so I started reading, that was a period of study. And I was thinking about buying like tax liens. And my brother, Nick, before we started investing together, he was really into stock options. So he was building this like automated system for trading stock options. And we were just kind of comparing ideas and exchanging. But, you know, I had in the back of my mind like rental properties. And then when I read like Cash Flow Quadrant, have you read that book?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, I really liked that one because it talked about like the employee. Okay. I was like, all right, I was an employee. I'm not an employee anymore. Then self-employed, the S quadrant was like, you think you're free, but you really own a job. And I was like, that's me, you know, like I think I'm free because I'm not going to Microsoft anymore and I control my own schedule. But if I stop working, there's no money, you know, but then I'm kind of a business owner because I have this one property near Microsoft, and that's like a business. And so I just thought, okay, how can I like get back into that side of things more and then still have the lifestyle and the kind of the happiness and peace and the spirit of what my lifestyle was. And I got to this point where my study kind of reached a zenith where I thought, okay, I just need to buy another rental property. I have to figure out how to buy another rental property. I know this can work. I just need to add. And someone recommended to me this company in Kirkland that was called Vestas. And the reason I got that recommendation was actually a lady I knew through yoga who was an accountant. She had said her husband had a couple rental properties. And I said, I got to have lunch with him and find out how he did it. So I was like, you know, looking up to him like, he's doing what I wanted to do. Well, he only had 2 properties and they were both like government foreclosure properties. He had bought like an old fire station and an old like water administration building, and he was renting them out. And even like you said, like it doesn't take that much. It's like he had just his house and these 2 rentals. That was his whole portfolio. But even just the math there was very favorable just to have those 2 rentals on the side. And he was working, but I think he was feeling like over time he was going to be released from that. And so he told me, he's like, oh, and a buddy of mine at work is like buying foreclosures through this company called Vestas in Kirkland. They have free meetings. So I went to their free meetings, and then I learned from there how to go to the foreclosure auction and buy foreclosed properties. And they had a financing partner called Eastside Funding. They do a lot of advertising in the area here. They're like 12% interest hard money loans, so pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But you could actually buy and hold properties for 0 down. So like they'd give you an 80 loan and a 20% loan. And then if you had enough money for the reno, and you could also do flip properties, I think you had to put 20% down. So I started just like going to the auction and seeing like, if I was bidding, what would I bid and what would I have gotten it for? But I didn't have any money. But that's when I started calling my brothers, and I said, hey guys, like they were both still had jobs. And I said, you know, if either of you guys want to try to partner on a property, I'll find the property. I'll do everything. If you just be like my co-financer and like put in the renovation budget. Mm-hmm. And then my brother, Nick, he had the money that he had set aside for this stock options investing system. He said, okay, like if you think you can prove that it can outperform my stock options trading, I'll buy a foreclosure. And we ended up getting a duplex for like $112,000 something in Auburn, Southeast Seattle area. And when we bought it and we fixed it up and rented it out and then got it appraised, and it was like the returns it was like almost infinity because there was so little cash in. And I think we bought it at 112. We put like 20 into it. We appraised almost at 200. And the whole process was just a few months long, like maybe 5 months long. And then it was like, okay, let's do one more. Let's do one more. And then pretty soon it was like, okay, this is the market's starting to recover, but there's a lot of foreclosure inventory. So as many of these like hard money loans as I can use to get properties, let's go. And then that everything just took off from there. And then once there was enough hold properties, we went on that path of like selling every couple of years and trying to roll up with the 1031 tax deferred exchange. So single family to duplex or 2 single families to a quadplex, and eventually got to where we are now, where we have all multifamily.
So how many units do you guys have now?
Right now we're at 75 with a 1031 exchange from 10 that we just sold. So we were at 85 entering the year. We sold 10. So we're at 75, and then right now we have an offer out on an 11-unit off-market deal that we're hoping to buy to take us to 86. And then that's aside from my other property, and Nick has one from his post-college days that's in Arizona. So we both have like a orphan side single-family home, and then eight buildings, 4 in Seattle, 4 in Everett, and then the 9th building is hopefully going to be in Everett as well. But we got a couple targets. Yeah.
Sweet. So what you guys are doing with the foreclosures, and did you just focus primarily on small multifamily properties, or was it like kind of whatever came across the table?
It was, I wanted to do multifamily because when I would run the numbers for like to hold the property, it was always easier to cash flow if you had multiple units. Mm-hmm. It was like the rent scales faster than the price to purchase. So it was just easy to see, like the more units, the easier to cash flow. But there weren't that many multifamilies coming across the auction.
Yeah.
So anytime there was a duplex or triplex or quadplex, or I think one time we got a fiveplex, or two times we got fiveplexes. And both of those times it was like, the one fiveplex that we had seen at auction in months. It was like, we are getting this property. Yeah. So we would like really go aggressive on it. But then aside from that, we got several single family homes and a condo, and some duplexes as well.
Okay, so just to kind of give like an overview of how you guys were doing it.
Yes.
You would go to the auctions, and then because there was this hard money lender there, because there were so many properties, so many people doing it, there was already a local lender that was doing this hard money. You established a relationship with them, so you would make an offer on the property. They would do almost 100% financing. You would just have to finance the rehab, or if it was a flip, you would have to put like a 20% down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the flow that how the week went is like Thursdays, this company Vestis, which was basically a few agents that were specializing in scouting out the foreclosure properties. They would figure out from the trustees that were facilitating the auction properties, what are the properties that are coming up for sale this Friday morning. And then Thursday night, anyone who was interested could go to this meeting, and you'd sign a document that says, like, if I buy a property at the auction, having attended this meeting, I'm going to pay your commission. I think it was like 3% of whatever they thought the fair market value was. I think that's how they did it. Because then if you got it for cheaper, you still pay the same commission, or if you overpaid, you still pay the same commission. I think it was something like that. But at that time, it was very familiar to me, and now I'm forgetting exactly how they got their commission. But anyway, you agreed to pay a chunk of money and not like go to their meeting and get all the data and then try to buy it on your own as bidding for yourself. So the next day, the Vestis agent would be bidding on your behalf, and they would bring the cashier's checks from their sister company, Eastside Funding, saying like, when the auction would start, the trustee would say like, okay, now we're going to auction off this property at like 3202 Grand Avenue in Everett, which is one of the properties we got this fiveplex. And then the agent that we're working with would say, okay, I'm bidding, and then on behalf of Jeremy Jones, and here's the cashier's checks that if we win the auction, we've got the money. And that money was coming from Eastside Funding, and that would have meant that Thursday at that meeting, I also met with the Eastside Funding guy and said, these are the properties I'm looking at. This is where I stand with regard to any outstanding loans that are already happening, because they wouldn't want to have too many loans with you at a time without knowing exactly like, okay, if you've got like a flip that's about to close in 2 days or something, then we're happy to start a new project with you. But if you got 5 projects going on and none of them have an end game in sight, then we don't want to, get over leveraged with you.
Sure.
So, and then if it was going to be a buy and hold, they would want to see that we had pre-approval with a lender to refi out of the Eastside Funding hard money loan into a 30-year fix. So that's where my brother came in with his engineering job. He works for Raytheon Missile Systems based out of Arizona. He since moved to Colorado, but he still works for them remotely. And so he would be working with a lender for like a 30-year fixed residential rental to say, yeah, I'm pre-approved. If the property that we buy, we can fix it up for X and it will have an ARV after repair value of Y, then this mortgage company will refinance us out of the hard money loan into the normal residential rental loan, and that will be our exit path. And so having done that, we would go to the auction on Friday where the Vestas agent would know, like, these are the ones Jeremy's looking at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties. These are his strike prices. Eastside Funding is approved to loan him 80% on this one or 100% on this one. And he's not going to get all 5 of them, but he can get up to 1 or up to 2. And then I'd be there the whole time too, talking with them. But once like our strike prices and the financing was all dialed in, I didn't really have to do anything at the auction, unless for whatever reason there was like 2 trustees going on at the same time, and the agent would say like, okay, you got to go bid for yourself on this one because I'm going to be over here. So I would always be there and kind of getting a feel for, how many people were going after which properties. And that was kind of our path for those first few years, is picking up all these foreclosures.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So do you think that is a viable path today?
It's a good question. I actually don't know because I haven't been doing it. Like as soon as the multifamily part of it started to dry up, like there was a point, I guess it was maybe 2015 or so, where there were hedge funds that started coming to the auction and buying like big chunks of properties. Like it was like the individual investors, like maybe you and me and some of the people that I met there that were like buying properties for their own personal portfolio would be showing up like, okay, we're going to bid on 5 and try to get 1. And then at some point there were hedge funds there where there'd be a guy there that was like, my job today is to like buy 10 properties. And they weren't that sensitive on price. They were just like converting money from other asset classes into real estate and just buying big chunks. So then the ones that were left for the rest of the individual investors like myself, there was less inventory. And as the market started to recover, then less properties go to foreclosure because they could maybe do a short sale or some other way to cash out, to get out from underneath the loan. And, of course the foreclosures are all predicated on like, for some reason the mortgage is not being paid, and they haven't figured out how to sell out from under it. And then as the market recovers, there's more ways to save the foreclosure from happening. So right around as that was going on, I was also looking at like, okay, what does it take to get like a 4-plex or a 5-plex, like just on the open market? And there was one that had some problems. It had gone like pending and back to active and pending and back to active. And we had the idea of asking, would they do seller financing for a year? So in other words, like the seller would be like the kind of like the Eastside Funding, kind of our bridge, but much cheaper. And this particular one said yes. And so we did this property. And as soon as we were on that track, we just like never went back to the auction again. Yeah. So I don't know if it's a viable, I would assume that there are foreclosure properties to be had and that it's still going on, but maybe like the next time there's a crash, like coming out of that would be the next time that there'd be a lot of inventory potentially. But I also think like, and I've heard this from a few places. I'm curious, like if you agree with this. I don't think like timing the market is as important as just repeatedly taking action. So like at that time, like I was definitely benefited by the fact that I was buying a lot of properties aggressively when the market was low, but it wasn't like everybody was saying, oh, the market's low, so we're going to like buy. There were people then that were like thinking that what I was doing was risky, or that the market wasn't going to recover, or that it was going to go up a little bit and then go back down or whatever. And so if you're speculating on what's going to happen with the market, I think it can really hold you back. And so I just kind of felt like at that time, like the foreclosure, it was like I kind of struck a vein that I was like, okay, this is working, so I'm going to keep going in this direction. But then once I found the seller financing vein, it was like, okay, now let's go this direction. And we also did some on-market deals with the hard money as well. So like it wasn't foreclosure, but it was still that same like hard money loan to put in a good as cash offer, buy it, and then refinance it later. We shifted away from the auction once it appeared that the inventory had dropped. So I would say, I don't know if it can work now, but I think the spirit of it, which is just finding ways to get into properties creatively through bridge loans or partnerships, that's still there. It just may be that there may be less inventory at foreclosure auction, but other ways to find the properties.
And I agree with you as far as, maybe don't wait on timing the market, because there's people, like you said, in 2013, probably even that far back, 13, 14, 15, 16, they were saying, oh, it's going to crash. Then they didn't end up buying anything for the last 10 years, and they're still in the same place they were. As long as you do your numbers and the numbers are making sense. I do think, though, that at certain points, you should probably take more conservative action. Say, hey, maybe I shouldn't base any interest in appreciation because of where we're at, or build in a little bit extra buffer of rent depreciation because of where we're at, or whatever, but I agree with you on that. But a good point that you made is that, you went from the auction block, which might not be viable today, but then you went into seller financing. Now, do you guys do most of your deals seller financing? Is that kind of your preferred method? Or what is your preferred method now?
Yeah. So believe it or not, all of our buildings are on seller financing or private financing now. So we have no bank loans. Besides, even my personal home is with a private lender. My original property that we've spoken about that's in Redmond that I still have has a loan from Wells Fargo. And I know my brother has some lender on his one house in Arizona, but everything we own in multifamily is all seller finance. And that has come just by kind of making it known to anyone that if they send a mailer that says, hey, this property is for sale, call for offers, I'll reply an email and say, hey, I saw this property. Would the seller carry the note? If not, would you let me know if you come across anything like off-market deals with seller financing? And I've been doing that for so long. And also, whenever I get a call from someone that's, a lot of the agents that are looking for work and networking in multifamily, they'll see if my brother and I close a deal or two deals or something, we'll get a letter or a call. It's like, hey, I see you're active in the market. Do you have any properties that you'd like me to do a free appraisal of? Or is there anything you're looking for? What's your criteria? And I'll just say anything multifamily seller financing, let me know. If it's off market, I'll look at it. And I've done enough of that every once in a while, someone will call me and just say, yeah, I've been talking to the seller. There's this, 9-unit up in Everett, and I think that the owner would carry the note. And now we've got so much experience with it. We can say, oh yeah, we've done, 15 seller financing deals. Here we use this company called Evergreen Note Servicing to service the loan. We've got a promissory note format that we can show you that we've used, and, stuff like that. So the person that's selling will feel like they're dealing with experienced investors and not someone that's just doing seller financing because they can't get a loan because they're not financially viable. Our feeling about seller financing is that we are financially viable to be able to get bank loans, but there's certain nuances to how the banks will analyze your financial situation that make you go a lot slower than we would like to. So for example, last year we bought 4 buildings. So now if we try to refinance a property, all 4 of those buildings from a tax return perspective have nothing because we haven't filed our 2019 taxes. When we do file our 2019 taxes, the gross rents from those 4 buildings are going to be partial years. And it's at the beginning when we haven't necessarily done our fix-ups and got it up. So it takes several years for a property's full health to reflect on tax returns. And the banks, even the commercial banks, are starting with the tax returns. So I find with seller financing, you just deal with the terms and the price for that deal, and they can kind of underwrite us if they want to some degree, but they're not using the same rules as the banks are. So it allows you to go faster. It eliminates the appraisal step. And also it allows us to combine funds. So for example, if there's a deal that we really like where it's hey, if we had $600,000, we could buy this property. A traditional bank is not going to let you gather that $600,000 by also borrowing it against your other properties. But for a seller financer, if they're comfortable with, hey, as long as you have $600K, let's do it, we could borrow that pin the debt in second position against other properties, or find it in a creative way and get it into our account like 2 days before closing and then close. Whereas a bank is like, they want that to be seasoned funds that you've had in your account for 60 days, things like that. So once we figured out those angles and really started focusing on the seller financing, I wouldn't say that it's not like we're striking a deal like every 2 weeks or anything like that, but for last year, all seller financed. And then some of the people that we've worked with where they seller financed a deal and then later we sold that property, we'd say, hey, we're paying you off, but if you want to continue financing us, you can like keep loaning us the money and we'll go buy another building. And so we've had a couple people stay with us. So now we kind of have this crop of smaller private investors that will loan us smaller chunks like 50 or 100K on promissory notes or second position. And then we have the seller financiers that are either the ones that sold us the building or people we've worked with before. And it allows us to move faster and be a little more nimble. And then, I mean, as you know, I'm sure from working with banks, like it can just be very time consuming and tedious. And you feel like you're doing a lot of stuff where you're like reiterating and explaining the same stuff, or being like, yeah, like I showed you, this is the rent, even though the tax return doesn't have that, or there's this like you move into this like paperwork realm of checking boxes and out of common sense. And I feel like the seller financing is like very much more in like creativity and common sense, but it's rare because most people want to get cashed out. So I'm like ultra enthusiastic about trying to find seller finance deals, and when it's there, like really go for it.
It's totally a viable option because, I interviewed a couple of podcasts ago, Gabriel Hamill, he's from like Oregon. And I think he said he's bought 176 units.
Oh, wow.
Every single one seller finance.
There you go.
And so and he's just done, and he started with no, kind of like you, like he didn't have he didn't have any job at the time when he started.
Yeah.
And he just went out there and started hustling, hitting the streets. So let's kind of talk about, how can somebody, like, how do you guys find the deals? I want to walk through like maybe a deal, like how do you find it? What you say to the person, how do you get them to, do the seller financing and all that kind of stuff. So how do you guys find the deals? You guys direct marketing, or is it mostly through networking? How does that happen?
Okay. Haven't done any direct marketing. So like the main method now that I have for looking at properties is using just the MLS. And I just will look on Redfin is the site I use the most to look at the MLS. Mm-hmm. And then the agent that we work with mostly when we sell properties and we put in offers for MLS properties, we have like an email search set up that sends us like every multifamily that's I think above $1 million and below $6 million that's in this geographic range that we want to know. So we get triggered whenever a new property comes on the market.
Is that just a commercial broker, or is it a...
No, just a regular like MLS residential broker, but it catches all the properties that show up on the MLS. Uh-huh. And then, is that what you meant by just a commercial?
Because some brokers are just strictly commercial.
Okay, no, she's actually more residential. Okay, we're like the only clients of hers I think that are really like mostly multifamily.
Oh, she loves you then, dang.
She loves us, yeah, and we love her. When we started, she was the selling agent or listing agent when I was doing flips. So like at the foreclosure auction with my brother, we tried to do as many buy and holds, but we didn't have enough like financing slots to hold them all. So some of them became flips to raise cash. And then my former manager at Microsoft, I did some flips on the side with him, and he's the one that introduced me to her. Lori is her name. And she became our kind of go-to for listing and selling the foreclosures after they were flipped. And then we just kind of stayed with her because of how adept she is at negotiating things. But she's not like a specialist in multifamily, but she can do it, and she works really well with us. But then sometimes we're looking at off-market deals that come, like if an agent calls me and just has somebody that wants, they don't want to list it per se, but they're just like, going to either they're responding to a mailer from this agent, or they reached out to this agent. It's like, hey, I've got this 10-unit property. I want to sell it. Do you have buyers that might be interested? There's a lot of that in the multifamily sphere where an agent will try to find a buyer directly. And, part of that is probably so they can either get extra commission themselves for working both sides, mm-hmm. or to simplify the deal for the seller so that they don't have to separately pay a buyer's agent. Or just to simplify the whole process and not have the tenants get concerned that it's on the market and there's a bunch of people coming to look at it. So, the MLS is definitely much more dense with single family and like maybe duplex. And as you start getting up, there's more business from what I can tell in the higher number of units that occurs off of the MLS. But there's also the commercial MLS, which I can peruse without having a brokerage license myself, which I don't. So a lot of times I'll just look, maybe every 2 weeks or so, I'll just look at every single property on there and see if any of them seem like they might have seller financing. And then sometimes on the MLS, a property will just be marked as seller financing, or it will say in the notes like seller will finance. And then there's also kind of like a signature, I would say, if there's a property where it says like first time in the market in 25 years or original owner,
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, this is probably paid off. And if it seems like it's overpriced and it's been on the market for say 20, 25 days, that's when I would want to reach out and say, would you consider carrying the financing for 2 or 3 years, especially like if the rents are super low? It's like, hey, I'll get you your asking price, but would you finance it for 3 years? And during that time, I'll try to get the rents healthy. Then I'll refinance into a bank. So you'll get the price you want. And then you just wait a couple of years before you get paid out, but you'll be earning interest in between. So that's been the methods of finding properties. And then when I get mailers that say like, call for offers on different buildings, I'll usually contact the agent and just ask them if seller financing is there. So I've been like probing in that way enough that a deal will kind of fall my way every couple months.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you find that you're able to maybe pay more for the property with seller financing, especially in today's market, everything is obviously more expensive. What are the reasons why you can pay more with seller financing?
So I feel like the time and energy that it takes to work with the bank is worth money to pay for. So I would pay more for a property that I can save all the time and energy I'd be going back and forth with the bank. Plus a bank will probably require amortized payments, whereas a seller might do interest only, which makes it easier to hold the property from a cash flow perspective. The bank is definitely going to have a loan origination fee and an appraisal and probably prepayment penalties, which the seller financer probably won't have. So when you add up all of that and plus the opportunity to potentially leverage more, like maybe put 20% down instead of 35% or 30% down, I feel like it worked well to overpay. I'm not saying I'm not like recommending this for everyone, but just my thought and my model is I would overpay on the price by some amount, like maybe a property that I think is worth 2.7, maybe I'd pay 2.9 or 3 million if the seller will finance the whole thing, if it's only 4%, and have an easy close, and all we have to do is come up with the down payment and we can get into this property that we had no business really getting into because we didn't have enough down payment, or we weren't really looking in that price range at the time. And then all of a sudden, okay, we own this property. Now we can get in and start fixing up the units and getting the rents up and doing things to actually make the property worth that $3 million that we paid and more, and do our magic to it. Like we feel like through our management and value add that we can build up the equity quickly to account for what we say overpaid. And then also the benefits we're getting on the terms are cash savings. So you can kind of do you can always do like just a straight apples to apples, like, okay, how much, like if I hold this for 5 years, how much am I going to spend on financing? And if I save, $120,000 on financing for doing interest only payments with the seller, I could add that $120,000 to the purchase price, and I'm still basically paying the same for the investment, but I'm getting into a property that maybe I wouldn't have been able to get into otherwise.
Do you guys have for one, does it have to cash flow right from the beginning?
We would look at a property that, like, if let's say that it didn't cash flow for you, this is how I think about it. Again, I'm not recommending this or saying this is like the right way to think about it, but I'm kind of like, as you can tell, like ultra enthusiastic when it comes to like seller financing, multifamily. So I would think this way, like, if it was going to negatively cash flow $1,000 a month for year one, but the only reason is because the rents are like 60% of what market would be, I would say, okay, all I have to do in my mind is basically just budget $12,000 for year one, and $1,000 a month is going to patch that negative cash flow. So it's a $12,000 hard cost. And then by year two, I'm positive cash flow.
Yeah.
So I would be willing to buy a property like that if it was a good condition in a nice area, something that I felt really confident that we could do our value add routine to. I'm not necessarily recommending that people buy negative cash flow, but I like looking at it as a whole package, because if you look at like the curve that that the rents will follow, if you own a building for 10 years and year one is like severely low, and then year two is like okay, and then year three you're getting to market level, and then you're going up from there. Why would you judge the whole 10-year lifespan of that property based on just what it earns in year one, which is artificially low, which is why you're getting the deal in the first place? So I don't mind negative cash flow in year one if I feel comfortable that the cost that I'm spending for that negative cash flow, I'm just thinking of it mentally as like almost like a repair.
Right.
So I would do that. Yes.
No, yeah, it makes sense. And then, so do you guys use property management on these? You had mentioned your property manager.
Yes.
Turnaround process. How did you find that property manager for these properties?
So our first property manager that we used called Full Service Property Management in Seattle area was, I think they sent a direct mailer to anybody that owned like multifamily and had an out-of-state address on the like the taxpayer record. It went to Nick's home in Arizona, and then we called him and just hired him. So we used them for a few years, like 2013 to or maybe 13 or 14 for 4 or 5 years. And then in 2018, we started with our own kind of internal self-managed, but a contractor. The business is called Wanderlust Handiwork, and it's owned by Eric, a friend of mine who is a musician that I played gigs with. And we actually went in fall 2014. We went on a tour to the Marshall Islands, and like while we were there, I was telling him about my real estate, and he's a guitar player and vocalist, but he was doing property preservation work, like where foreclosure companies would hire him and his crew to just like board up the windows or repair any leaks or just kind of preserve the property that was under foreclosure. Mm-hmm. And then we were talking, and he was like, yeah, I can do everything that you guys need for your rentals. And so we started hiring him for some just contractor work, not for property management. But eventually we decided, hey, rather than pay this property management company to do our management, and it's a little more black box where like we couldn't see everything that was going on. We couldn't see like the tenant ledgers, and we couldn't always see what was going on if there was a vacancy, like what effort was being put into renting it relative to their other obligations for other owners. We thought, well, what if we take control of it ourselves, hire our own leasing agent, hire our own property manager, use Eric and his crew as the construction, because we had worked him into where he was doing the construction for all of our properties. Even though we had a property manager, we were doing our own construction. So we terminated our relationship with Full Service Property Management, and then we bought this software called AppFolio. Have you heard AppFolio?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I've had several people mention it.
Okay, yeah. So we had done some research on different software and just found like it was a lot more powerful and transparent than what we were getting. What we had with AppFolio or with Full Service Property Management was they had a software called PropertyWare, and what we had was an owner portal. So it was like a small view on what was going on. Yeah. So with AppFolio, we're like the owners, presidents of our installation. We can see every piece of data in there. And then we hired Eric, who was basically a general contractor for us, but he's a very personable guy, and he thought he could do leasing and tenant relations. And we said, okay, well, you'll be our general contractor and leasing agent and tenant relations. And we'll be also helping with like for example, I set the pricing on all of our units, and I write the ads and do some other activities that can be done within the AppFolio software, but I'm not talking to the tenants and going out and visiting the properties as much, if at all. And then Nick is totally remote, living in Colorado, but he does a lot of the numbers type things, like pays all of our monthly bills, and he also oversees and trains and guides our administrative assistant, who's our cousin that lives in Colorado, Kaylee. She does an awesome job for us. And so like as much as we've been able to train her up on doing, she's picked up a lot of tasks. So basically like our operation is me, Nick as owners and participants, and then Eric as our leasing agent general contractor, who works mostly exclusively for us, but he can do other contracting gigs if he wants to, but he's pretty much supported by us. We pay him like a property management fee, and then he earns money by his contracting business doing all the work on our properties. Mm-hmm. And then we have Kaylee, our administrative assistant. So it's basically like 4 key players, and then Eric has people that work for him to actually do the labor, the building and the, right, putting in the flooring and the cleaning and the landscaping and all that. And he oversees all that and then bills us for it through AppFolio.
Okay, cool. So no, that totally makes sense. And it's kind of like the natural progression of where some people end up going is when they get more and more units, they end up taking the property management on and building their own company, because you're obviously super smart and go-getter. So you built this, apartment company, and now I might as well build this company as well. So just to make it kind of clear with the owner financing, this is kind of a way, I talked earlier if it was viable to do the foreclosure stuff.
Yes.
Which it might not be that way, but it's still viable to get deals today. And one of those ways to get deals is by, you can do direct mail marketing, or if you're finding properties on the MLS that kind of meets what you're looking for, just start reaching out to these people and asking if owner financing is there, because you might be able to give that higher market price with the terms that you can work and negotiate with the owner financing, like maybe lower interest rate, or like you mentioned, the closing costs will be less, the appraisal's different, interest only for a certain amount of years or whatever. You never know what people are willing to take, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're like, let's say you have $1 million of down payment funds and you have a pre-approval from a bank and you can get a property for $3 million, you might be going around looking at different 10-unit properties around Seattle and saying like, okay, now this one I'm going to offer 2.2, or this one I'm going to offer 2.3 or 2.6. Then you go and inspect it and you're like, okay, these things are wrong with it. I'm going to ask for this much money off because of what I found in the inspection, so on and so forth. You're going to be more picky that you have that financing, and like that seller is going to get cashed out when you pay, when you buy the property, and like they're going to be really motivated for you to close the loan, but you've got some leverage there because you've got this financing power behind you and you've got the down payment, you're all ready to go. And if you don't buy that one, you can go on to the next one. Well, seller financing, I feel like the seller is giving us like a privilege if they finance it for us, but then we're also going to like give them something they need. So for example, almost anytime we inspect a property of seller financing, as long as we have a kind of an idea what it is going in, we hardly ever ask for anything off on repairs. If anything, we'll say, gosh, we really have to replace all these panels quickly, so we want $60,000 off on the down payment, but not on the price. Okay. So we'll have more cash in hand, but we're still going to give you the price, or we'll do something like that where they feel like, hey, that's pretty fair, but it keeps our liquidity so that we can do the repair we need. And a lot of times I think the properties that are available for seller financing, there's something about it that maybe the people that have that loan in hand are competing for it, maybe would pass over. Mm-hmm. It's like the one that I'm thinking about, I told you we offered on an 11-unit off market, and this is a older gentleman. I think he's dealing with some health problems. He's thinking about selling the property. He's owned it for a long time. He's done financing before. He's thinking about carrying the financing with us and selling it. If that one doesn't work out, there's another one in Seattle I'm looking at where they may be willing to finance it for 2 or 3 years. And the unique thing about it is that it has no parking at all. Like 10 units, 0 parking. So everyone that you get there is going to have to park on the street or have no car. So that, that limits your options. But at the same time, it's like in a great area. It's well built. The unit configurations are great, and I think it's priced fairly, maybe except for the parking part. So I'm thinking, okay, like you got no parking lot, but you're going to finance it for us for a few years, and maybe that's a trade-off that we're willing to do, because I feel like when you get multifamily in a really nice area like Seattle, like coastal cities that tend to appreciate above the national average and not have the same setbacks that are dependent on like a single industry or a single factor can make the whole market go down. Like it's like San Francisco and Los Angeles and Seattle and Boston are pretty well buoyed up by people wanting to live there, and a lot of things going on there that like one change in society or the businesses there is not going to crush the market. Whereas some places where if it's like a town that is really linked to one industry and that industry falls, the whole market might fall. So I feel like in Seattle, you know that there's going to be that population expansion and there's going to be an upward pressure on the values just because of limited space. If you buy a multifamily property, even if you get something that's not perfect or you have to pay a little bit extra going in, I always think like I'm earning money in multiple ways. Like once I get this property, I have the cash flow from the rents. I have principal pay down if there's a loan that has principal included. There's the value add, like the forced appreciation. There's the natural market appreciation, and there's tax benefits. So all those things are happening at the same time. And so it's not that I have to scrap and claw to get the very best deal going in. It's more about just getting in and then starting that climb. So that's where I think seller financing can work well for both parties. And so getting back to your question, like, yeah, I do think that's a way to try to get into a deal if you don't have the down payment. Sometimes it can be a little discouraging because most people will say no. I mean, it's not discouraging to me. Somebody might feel discouraged if they get some no's or they find like, wow, there's not very many of these. But the way I look at it is like, if I get like one a year, that's actually a lot, Yeah. But I may have to
bigger units. Yeah.
Sure. So I may have to inquire like 30 times, may have to inquire 100 times and put out 5 offers and get one. But if I buy one like 8+ unit property a year, that's a lot more action, than maybe the average person is putting into their financial development. And it doesn't take that much time and energy to do it. And then once you get, I feel like each property we get, it's just kind of like putting it on that conveyor belt where it's going to climb. And now that we have a reasonably sized portfolio, whatever we buy as that new property, it doesn't have to carry us on cash flow or net worth. It's just like starting. And then after a few years, it'll start to pick up and very complete.
Yeah, totally. So I don't even know if there's an answer to this question, but I just popped in my head while you're talking, because we're talking about creative financing or coming up with different options. Like where can somebody even find out different options of financing? Because if somebody's newer and they're coming in, like, I don't even know what to ask. What are the creative things? Like, how can somebody find those out? Do you think? I don't even know.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you just start to understand how a loan is structured and the fact that there's different types of lending companies out there, the way I kind of think about it is like you could borrow money from friends and family, like on a promissory note, probably going to pay them like higher interest, and they're going to give you money that's easier to get because of the trust relationship. You can get money from a seller and you can basically just make up the terms with them. And as long as it's mutually agreed upon, it's good. Then once you move into like any kind of institution, there's hard money, which is maybe 12%, bridge loans, which are like 8 to 9%. So they're like a little easier to get, but also might be like a year or two length, higher interest, but not as high as the hard money loans that are like 5 or 6 months, really easy to get, but really expensive. And then you start getting to commercial loans that are maybe going to be like a 7-year ARM and like lower interest and a little harder to get, and then like the just 30-year fixed residential loans are the hardest to get. And if you start to just understand what each of those are and talk to the companies that do them and what they're looking for, I think pretty soon you can start to figure out the basic lending parameters. And on some level, there's no hard and fast rule in real estate. Like, I don't remember who said this, but I remember hearing once on like some kind of podcast or book that like, I love real estate because you can just make it up as you go along. Yeah. So I think with lending, like anything is possible. We have one of our seller finance properties, we have $2.4 million borrowed at 3.5% interest only for 5 years. Jeez. So that's a really low interest rate. That's a big chunk of money. And I would never have thought that was possible, but it was just through tweaking the dials of our offer. Like, this person wanted this purchase price and we said, okay, well, we'll raise the purchase price if we drop the interest rate. And then they said yes. All they cared about was hitting that mark, and they were willing to finance it. And you can pretty much set the terms however you want, as long as when you put your offer in, as long as it's enough to get them to reply and give you a counter offer, you get the conversation going. And you can tweak the terms of interest rate, length of loan. You can step the interest rate up. Like, one thing I've done for seller finance offers is say, okay, finance it for 4 years. The rents are so low that year 1, we want 3.5% interest, but year 2, we'll go to 4%, year 3, 4.5%, year 4, we just go up a half point each year. And then year 5, we'll expire the loan and pay the whole thing off. And so for them, they see that you're like on that upward path. But for us, it's like, wow, this is really good money for year one. And by year two, we've got the rents up a little bit and we can afford that little boost. And that was something I don't recall ever having been suggested to me. It was just kind of common sense, like, well, if we buy this property, it's really not going to work in year one unless we get really low interest. And in fact, now that you're asking about it, I was thinking I had one deal where we bought it, and the way the negotiation went, we just came to this point where we're like, all right, we can do it, but you just have to give us 3 months where we don't owe anything. We're like, the first mortgage payment is going to be due 4 months after we get it. It was a commercial space, and we needed time to get a tenant in there because it was vacant. We're going to be making zero.
Yeah.
And they said yes. So we bought a property and we just paid nothing on it for 3 months, and we started in the 4th month. No bank is going to do that for you.
Yeah.
And then also one that we bought last summer. This was an interesting one where the guy that was selling it, he had bought it on seller financing. So the people that had financed him, they extended that financing to us as the buyer, but then he added his own $320,000 second position loan as the seller to us behind that one. So our down payment was really small, and then the financing was basically like the first position original seller, the second position. And the way the negotiation went, he basically gave us that $320,000 as a zero interest loan for 5 months.
Oh, sweet.
Because he was motivated to sell. We met his price. We didn't ask for anything on inspection. And so we just got $320,000 for 5 months for zero. And so, that's hard to find, like $300,000 for zero. But it was because for him, it was linked with unloading the property and getting the price he wanted. But I mean, he basically just trusted us based on our track record that we would actually pay him back in 5 months. And we did.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many ways out there, and you never know what people's motivations are. And
yes,
you just got to go out there and ask and just go through a bunch of them. And it might take you 100. Like there was that one Bigger Pockets episode. I think the guy said he called it was like 4,800 phone numbers before he got his first deal or something ridiculous.
Wow.
Like
mercy,
thousands. But he finally did. And it's like if he would have never made that 4,799 phone call or whatever, he would have never been in where he is now. But that's a little extreme, but still the point is just keep it out there and ask questions and continue on. So
yeah.
With that said, where are you guys headed from now? Are you just going to continue with this size multifamily? Or are you going to look to get into bigger stuff, stay in Seattle, get outside Seattle? What's the plan for the future?
Well, our goal for this year, our first goal is to complete this 1031 exchange for the 10 units that we sold in January and find a target and buy the target. And then we are most likely just going to stay put for the rest of the year 2020 as far as our shared portfolio with my brother and I, and kind of work on setting up some business structure and looking at making sure that our will, like our progression plan, is well set for how to pass on the assets, because it's kind of weird to set all that stuff up when you're just getting started because you don't even know if you have anything worth planning for. But now we have enough of a portfolio, we want to really start planning that stuff out, and it takes some time and energy and work with an attorney. So kind of asset management and protection is going to be a theme for the rest of the year. And then on the side, I want to sell my single family home in Redmond and roll it into a multifamily. And doing that, since it's not a property that I partnered with my brother on, it's probably one that I'm going to want to find a seller financer opportunity. And when I sell it, I'm only going to have that certain window of time to find a replacement and make sure that I can get it myself. So that's kind of my goal for the rest of the year, is to turn that single family into something better, like at least a fourplex or something, because it's very static from a cash flow perspective relative to the amount of equity in there. And then as far as after that, we haven't set specific goals for number of units or how quickly we want to expand, but I think a general evolution into better buildings in better areas with that we feel will be more insulated from economic downturn by being in more attractive areas, and will be easier for us to maintain and attract good tenants because of their quality. So what I think will probably happen is each year we'll probably look at what's our least attractive property that we've held the longest, and it's got a lot of enough equity in it that we could sell it and upgrade if we kind of keep doing that, it's like you take the worst one and exchange it for the best one, and then take the worst one and exchange it for the best one. There's this kind of evolution. We see that going towards more units per building is good. There's a lot of efficiencies there. So I think we'll probably continue to do that. And we did kind of set a goal at some time that 100 units would be a good goal to reach, just because it kind of represents a milestone of a certain level of scale. And so I see us probably trending in that direction. But also we're both realizing this is a time to be grateful for the lifestyle that it affords us to have all the passive income and a successful business that we, for the first few years in 2012, 13, 14, I mean, every deal there was this sense of like, is it going to work? Are we going to be able to sell it? Are we going to be able to refi it? And now we're kind of at a point where like, yeah, there could be an economic downturn that affects us and affects how easy it is to rent units, how easy it is to refi. But we also feel like we're not in that like scrapping and clawing mode of like, are we going to make it? So we're thinking also about like quality of life. And, for me, a lot of what I think about is having more time for my meditations, more time to be in nature, more time to exercise, try to eat healthy, keep stress as low as possible while still being productive. And so my goals are as much in that as they are in growth with the real estate. So I want those. It's like every move now that we make, we're looking at it not just from a financial goal perspective, but like as a quality of life maneuver,
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. Yeah. I feel you on that for sure. Well, no, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to your future and see where it comes, and hopefully have you back on the show when all that over the next couple of years as that progresses, and see where you're at. So
yeah, that'll be interesting.
So we'll move to kind of the last section here. What's your favorite resource for learning about, real estate? Is it books or a podcast, mentorship, or what do you like to look for? Or what do you think the best is for somebody out there maybe just getting started?
Well, I think it will probably be different for different people, whatever you tap into that's allowing you to feel like you're growing and expanding. Like for me, it started with books, physical books, and now I'm more on Audible books. So like audio programs. And I find like I do listen to some podcasts. I do because of like, YouTube suggests stuff based on your usage, and I see real estate things pop up and I'll watch them, but I'm not particularly dedicated or regimented about it. It's just the things that pop up. But for me, I would say if I had to pick one for me, it would be Booked on Tape on Audible. And the most recent one I listened to on the way back from a trip to Mexico last week, I was listening to How to Think Like the Wealthy by Dolph DeRoos. Have you heard of Dolph DeRoos?
I haven't, no.
He's also got a book called Real Estate Riches. He's one of the Rich Dad advisors, like Kiyosaki's.
Yeah, I've heard of that book, Real Estate Riches, I believe.
Yeah, so Dolph DeRoos, I believe that's the one he wrote. But he has this program in Audible called How to Think Like the Wealthy. The cover has this guy like just sitting out on the beach with his laptop, which it's like a little bit cheesy, I guess. But then I was thinking, well, hey, that was me. Like I was in Mexico with my laptop and checking some, stuff in AppFolio. So I listened to it. It was great, and it wasn't even like an audio book. It's more like him talking free form. But I would recommend that. I mean, I know that's not what your question was, but for me, like things like that, like when I can tap into something, a lot of times, like I already have the enthusiasm and the thinking that a lot of times when I read something these days about investing, it's not so much something like brand new as just resonating and like reinforcing the energy and enthusiasm that I'm feeling about something. And I find audiobooks do that for me.
Cool. What about I know what you're going to say, but piece of technology or something that you guys use.
You think I'm going to say AppFolio?
That's what I thought you were going to think you're going to say, man.
Not iPhone 11 Max or whatever. Okay.
I mean, maybe that helps too.
Okay. I'll say AppFolio because
you don't have to say it. Hey, say it's what is that meditation app? Do you use any of those things or anything?
I don't.
You're probably get better at it than I am. I struggle a little bit.
I'll say AppFolio because I really have been impressed with the software and the responsiveness of their customer support and the upgrades they make to the app and the website. And we just flex, as much as we can out of that software, and we've gotten a lot out of it. And I feel like in a way, it's like it's allowed us the time that we would have spent asking our other property manager, like, what's going on with this? What's the status with this? We just jump in Appfolio and we participate to some degree, but it makes the repetitive tasks, whether it's bookkeeping, rent collection, posting vacancies, tracking maintenance, it makes everything very organized for us, and it allows our administrative assistant and our leasing agent and my brother and I to all like work in the same software realm, whether it's from our phone or a tablet or a computer, and we're just constantly in there, just like living out of that. In fact, whenever the first of the month hits, which I believe is tomorrow, it'll show like your vacancy number and delinquency number. So like how many people are delinquent. So we always have this group text where like, a lot of people pay before the first. So out of our 85, now 75, because we sold the 10. So 75, maybe tomorrow it'll say like 43 people still owe rent. And then over the course of the day, like Nick will chime in and say, like, 35, and Eric will chime in, 20. And we just do a little countdown. It's through Appfolio. We have a lot of fun with it because it tracks the things that are most vital to the business and that allow us to rally around those key figures like vacancies and delinquencies and maintenance.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's kind of a cool little thing. I'm sure there's a ton in there too that is you can build on and like continue to grow with it. So
well, I'll say one more thing is that our accountant logs in with her own login and pulls the bookkeeping data out of Appfolio.
Oh, that's awesome.
For our taxes. Yeah.
It makes taxes so much easier because they're always a nightmare.
It's huge. It's huge. Yeah.
Cool. Well, where can people find out more about you or what you're doing, or if they just want to say hi or whatever?
Okay. Like that? My website is jeremyjonesmusic.com, and there's a contact form on there. And when someone submits on there, I get an email, and then I always respond to it. So that's a way. If it ever broke and I wasn't getting the message, then I guess I wouldn't know. But I think it works because I get messages through there.
Yeah.
So that's one way. But if you don't hear from me, then that means I didn't get it. And the other way to reach me would be Instagram, Jeremy J. Drums.
Jeremy J. Drums?
Yeah.
D-R-U-M-S?
D-R-U-M-S, drums, cool. Like the instrument. Yeah, so at Jeremy J. Drums, and then the website is jeremyjonesmusic.com.
Okay. Well, right on. Jeremy, this is a ton of good info. I love your enthusiasm, the excitement.
Thank you.
It's like, that's like me talking to other people about real estate. I'm like, yes, come on, do it. So
yeah, you said I could like talk a lot, so.
It's perfect. Yeah, no.
Okay.
We can keep going forever, but
I know.
Leave room for more episodes in the future. So
okay. I promise you, I actually did hold back on some things I would have said just to not go till midnight. So
I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, you were leaving it in the bank, so it's good.
Exactly.
It's like you want to leave a little bit of meat on the bone on the apartment for the next investor, so you can sell it easier, have an out. See?
Always.
Perfect. Well, thanks for being here again, man. I really appreciate it. Hope everybody learned a lot from this, and reach out to Jeremy if you have any questions. And Jeremy, have a good evening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Justin. Best wishes with your podcast and your investing and your happy life.
Yes, sir. All right. Talk to you later.
Okay. See ya.